I think an awesome name would be the colored section. I think that would be a fantastic name.
And for the record, Chris White is Caucasian. Like,
Yes,
have you heard of the Loring Park Sessions 77? It's not,
I
I don't think it's
have.
an,
Hey, you guys are great, man. Who's your influences and blah blah blah. And we're talking about like Pee Wee's Big Adventure or something.
Chris Greene is an Evanston-based saxophonist who leads the Chris Greene Quartet. We talk about some of his non-jazz influences and how he pays tribute, his long-standing musical rapport with his band, and a couple of ideas for new projects. All that and more, here on Blue Collar Jazz. Welcome back to Blue Collar Jazz, and today I am joined by sax player, Evanston sax player, Chris Greene. Thank you so much for coming on to this rinky-dink YouTube show or blog or whatever I decide to settle on. But Chris, you have been described by yourself in your electronic press kit as acoustic, organic, rhythmic, guerrilla jazz, but I think I prefer your title, which is the future Emperor of Evanston.
Yes, self-imposed title. Yes.
It's a good one, and I think if I had to choose someone, even though I'm not too familiar with the town, I've got some friends up there, but I think I would choose you out of between you and my friends. Definitely up
Thank
there.
you.
They don't play
Thank you.
saxophone.
Well, thank you. Well, I look at it like this: like if Aretha Franklin can be the Queen of Soul,
Of-
and Bruce Springsteen can be the boss, and Frank Sinatra can be chairman of the board, I you know I think I think I've earned it at this point.
There is no rival claim,
There
not
you go.
as of yet. I'd like to see that duel when it comes down. But just going through your discography and all the stuff written about you, you've got some of my favorite things written, like in either in liner notes or just quotes that you take and put on your albums there. So,
Oh,
actually, you were introduced by William Kirk from in your album A Group
yeah,
Effort.
it's my buddy. Yeah,
Shine on his brain. The shine on his
The
brain.
shine on his brain illuminates brilliance.
Brilliance.
yeah.
Those are some words.
That's my buddy. That's my buddy. Yeah. Well, we that show that was from our referring to our album a group effort. So we recorded that live at the. It's a place that's no longer there. It's called the Main Stage. I guess it is still there, but it's not. They're not.
I saw the
having
history
music
of it.
anymore.
It had changed a lot of hands over
Yeah,
the
it's a
years.
great. It was a fantastic venue while I was around, and they were really nice enough to let us play there, and so they pretty much let us do what we want. So we'd book a show, and then we'd have like one of our favorite bands or whatever open up for us, and then we actually had William Kirk's band open up for us. And literally right before he goes out to introduce us, my bass player Mark Piani grabs him and says, "Hey, tell him, just go out there and." What did he say? He said, tell him that he's the 51st most influential person in Evanston or something like that. And then,
But he is the 51st most influential African American from Evanston.
and which pretty much, you tell Will Kirk to go talk to a crowd, it's going to be, you might as well hand some matches to a pyromaniac. He's just going to have a lot of fun. So, but it was fun. It was one of those things. It was so funny, and it was such a funny and natural thing that he did. We just like, well, let's open up the album with that. So that's what we did.
He's got that kind of energy, and his music kind of reflects that too.
Absolutely, I'm a big fan of his music.
Another favorite of mine from hustlenockin.com on Playtime One. Really fun, accessible (parentheses, i.e., not uppity) jazz, which is accurate actually. So I was like, okay, interesting way to put it, but actually that works because for me, I would say exploratory, but with a foundation of funkiness to it, especially early on, and at least what you have on Bandcamp, and a lot of personality once you get situated. So you said that you've been, in other interviews, you've been playing saxophone since you were 10. And
Yes.
It wasn't jazz, you weren't like born into jazz, but
Not one bit.
it was,
one
you
bit.
did catch on to it a little bit earlier, I think,
Yeah.
than many. I think in high school, I believe.
Yeah. It was kind of a confluence of things kind of happened. I mean, I was played in the jazz band, and I would take these little solos, but it was always fun. It was always fun. I was always somewhat good at jazz band, at band. It was always one of my favorite classes to do. I met a lot of my very best friends are still my closest friends to this day because of band. But it was always just fun and a hobby, and I never really thought I was any particularly good at it until like I would stand up to take solos, and people would applaud like a lot more vigorously. But I was like, "Whoa, okay, well, all right, that's pretty cool." Imagine if I really knew what I was doing, they might really get into it. But even before that, I think the spring concert of my sophomore year, the orchestra teacher, who was also the music theory teacher, kind of grabs me during a concert, and I figured maybe I was making too much noise during the orchestra set or something like that. I'm like, oh shoot, he's gonna I'm in trouble now. And he's like, come to my office right now, Greene. I'm like, oh, here we go. And so sit down. And it's like, man, it's like, you sound really good up there. Like, so are you thinking about taking my materials and music class? I'm like, materials and music, what's that? It's music theory. You're gonna take it, right? I was like, yeah, I guess. I mean, does it satisfy my art requirement? He's like, yeah, yes. It's like, oh well, shoot, let's go, let's do it. And then, but it was. I remember, being incredibly intimidated because we were analyzing all these classical pieces and basically learning the science behind like just reading on the page. Before, music was just like put it in front of me, I'll read it. But then I actually got to get the science and the building blocks behind it and why things were what they were, and identifying musical terms and listening to classical music more than I'd ever listened to it in my life. And it really just had this really profound effect on me. So that when I would go to solo in the jazz band, like even though I didn't have much command of the language until a lot later, it definitely, that kind of stuff definitely pointed me towards the right direction. And my band director was always on me to like listen, check this out, listen to this, check out this, and listen to this and whatever. And I was just, have you ever listened to John Coltrane? I was like. And I happen to have like one Coltrane album that my dad bought a long time ago. It's the Ohm album. Are you familiar with that at all?
I am familiar with it. That's a more advanced one
it's a tough listen.
Be exposed to it first.
It's a tough listen. I mean, now it's for your viewers who may or may not know, it's towards the more avant-garde free stuff. Now I've really grown to love a lot of that stuff, like interstellar space and stellar regions and what's the one with the big group one, I can't remember
the big group one. I know Love Supreme is the one
Ascension, Ascension, yeah. So stuff like that I dig. I love a lot. I really like even to this day, it's just like you put it on, I was like, oh, it doesn't hit me the way it should. But I love all that stuff, and so my only frame of reference for Coltrane was Ohm, and so my band director. Mr. McReynolds was like, check this out. I'm like, ugh, no, that stuff's horrible. I don't like that stuff. He said, okay, I know your problem. Go to the library tonight and go to the Evanston library tonight and grab My Favorite Things. And I grabbed it, and I put it on, and I listened to it, and I fell in love. I'm like, hey, this Coltrane guy's pretty good. And I was like, hey, who else does he play with? I read somewhere he played on some album called My Kind of Blue. Should I check that out? And my friend was like, yes, go right now and get it. And so
that's every specifically jazz mentors, they want to hear that.
Yeah, he's like, oh yeah, please go get it. And so I grabbed that, and then I listened to that. And I'm like, hey, this is pretty good too. Hey, it looks like he played on another album called Blue Train. Should I grab that one too? Yes. Oh my God, yes. And so it just pretty much led me down a rabbit hole. So
that's awesome. I know that for a lot of people, you kind of had almost a backwards way of going into it, but that's an awesome trail. And jazz seems to be your home now, and that.
Yes.
But growing up, you clearly, especially earlier in discography, and even now, you had a lot of funk and hip hop influence. So if you could take us back in time, not too far back in time, of course, but if you could take us back in time to what was around you growing up at that time, what you were listening to, and how that influences your playing.
Sure. I mean, I'm a kid born in 1973, Generation X. So I was, I was the recipient of living, my parents had cable in like 1982, 83. So MTV, big Prince and Michael Jackson
There
fan.
you
So I
go.
got to hear all that stuff. Got to hear, while I'm waiting for those videos to come on, I'm hearing a bunch of other great stuff. But as a kid, my mother was huge into, or still is huge into like Motown and like Philly soul, like not the Chi-Lites. Shoot, why the Bishop by Golly, why I can't remember that.
Yeah.
Delphonics and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Stylistics. That's the word.
There you go.
Stylistics. So she's big into that stuff. And my dad was big into like funk and disco and stuff. So I have vivid memories of my mother having these card parties when she'd play a lot of her stuff, and like I might drive around with my dad, and he'd be playing like a lot of like disco and funk stuff, and so because just I'd heard a lot of stuff that was going on the radio, so a lot of that was I grew up hearing like Parliament, Funkadelic, and Prince, and Midnight Star, and all this great '70s and '80s stuff. And so that kind of leads me. The next kind of logical step after all that stuff was early rap and hip hop. So I'm hearing all that stuff with Yo MTV Raps on cable and Rap City and just you're just hearing it on the radio and kind of the ascension with like Run DMC and Eric B and Rakim and Big Daddy Kane and EPMD and just all that great '80s early wave stuff, early first wave of great stuff. So all that stuff is ingrained in my head. But then the more you start to listen to the stuff that came before it, then you're like, okay, they're sampling a lot of this stuff that my parents were listening to. It's like, they're sampling James Brown, or they're sampling P-Funk, or they're sampling Roy Ayers. A Tribe Called Quest is sampling a lot of Roy Ayers and, Bob James and all that stuff. So it's just one big kind of like, it's just, at the end of the day, it's all music. And I was able to make the connections, well, somewhat early on, but then the more I listened to, the more I realized where these guys were set. This music that I loved as a kid and still love, I kind of see where they were a lot of what they were sampling. So
Yeah, it's a whole list of people, and we can probably go on for another hour just listing.
Absolutely.
But I think what's really cool is that, especially where jazz is nowadays, but especially where honestly a lot of that music is, it's all fusing together. And of
Sure.
course, there is like the genre of fusion, in the '70s and '80s, but just all of it fusing together. Like last month, I think. Oh gosh. There was the Blue Shift Big Band, if you heard of them. They did like jazz interpretations of video game soundtracks.
Oh wow.
Which sounds corny and pastiche, but it's part of this bigger scene that is just sweeping the internet, because that's video game music, and it's a crossover thing. I know other people, or rather, there's all kinds of crossovers with rap and hip hop.
What's the name of the big band again?
Blue Shift Big Band. They're Chicago. They're a Chicago.
Oh,
Chicago group.
shoot,
And in fact, they're like the. I'm working on an article that is like going into all these bands that have been popping up in like the past 10 years, and Blue Shift is kind of like Chicago's band for that music. Their first album was like hard bop standards.
Okay.
But then like their second one was like, you know what? No, let's do it like Mario Kart. Let's interpret that, and it's actually pretty cool. And if you go down that rabbit hole.
That's pretty. I mean, that's I have to check that out. It's pretty incredible. I mean, it's funny. I just did a tribute at Fitzgerald's with my bass player and drummer. It's the second time we've done it, but we did we paid tribute to Way Out West by Sonny Rollins.
Yes, I was actually going to ask you about. You know what? In fact, I'll even just.
I'm sorry, I admitted.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Didn't jump in. But if you go back and listen to the original versions of those songs.
Yeah.
Oh, they're incredible. It's incredibly hokey, and the versions of those Bing Crosby versions.
Oh yeah,
they're incredibly hokey. But Sonny and Shelley and Ray are such magnificent musicians that they managed to like break through that and make them viable jazz vehicles. And Sonny, just by the fact that he genuinely loves those songs, and so it doesn't surprise me that a bunch of really, really talented young musicians are able to make viable jazz vehicles out of video game music, because it's not just them trying to get over or whatever. It's like they seem to genuinely dig that music, and they want to make something out of it. And I think that's fantastic. So
a lot of the jazz press, which I see. It sounds derogatory when I say it, but I guess I'm part of that part of that group. It's like jazz is chasing that trend, but I think it's the other way around. I think it's like this is where it's always been going because that's just what people like.
Well, I mean, if you can find an audience to go along with you, that's fantastic. But if if you're marrying your knowledge of the history with the stuff that you like, some really cool things can come out of it. So that's really cool.
When we talk back, we talked briefly, but you're not going to remember this, but we talked briefly back in 2016 after one of your shows at the Jazz Showcase. You mentioned Sonny Rollins was the sound you primarily molded yourself around. Has that shifted at all since? I mean, I know that's probably your foundation. Is there anyone latest that is like really hitting you in terms of like influences and like stuff you want to model yourself after, or is it just all Sonny all the time? Or
definitely not. I mean, Sonny is the pillar, certainly one of the big pillars. He's a pretty big pillar.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, there's been a lot of sprinklings. I mean, it's always been like Sonny Rollins, Coltrane, obviously. Hank Mobley has been a huge influence. Just he's one of those guys that people don't really talk about.
The hard bop hero, unsung in some ways.
Yeah, completely unsung. I mean, like I always think of it like Stan Getz, who's another favorite of mine, gets the glory of marrying the influence of Charlie Parker and Lester Young, kind of melding those influences together. Maybe to a slightly lesser degree is somebody like Sonny Stitt, who I'm also a huge fan of. And then somewhere in there is Hank Mobley, who I think just doesn't really get the credit he deserves. So Hank Mobley's in there. Bob Mincer from the Yellow Jackets, I'm a huge fan of his. Big fan of the stuff he does with Yellow Jackets and his own recordings.
Rush Hour, if you remember that tune. I think is that their debut? I forget, but that is the most perfectly titled song because that absolutely hits when you're in a hurry.
Yes, that's a great album. Actually, I've been for a while. I was on a big. Actually, during the pandemic, I was on a huge like Wayne Shorter kick, just to kind of like,
sure.
I'm a huge Branford Marsalis fan anyway, but his guy is Wayne, and so my thing is I always admired his compositions. I always admired his playing, but I, really didn't always take the time to really dig into what he was doing and what he was dealing with. So I'm happy that I was able to really dig into a bunch of his solos. So I did that for a number of months. I can do this all day. Charlie Rouse, who played with Thelonious Monk for several years, like just his approach. I've been checking a lot of him out just to kind of like the way he gets in and out of things. So Sonny's certainly the foundation of a lot of stuff, but it's lately just been like a lot of different things in there. So it's just like I can depending on who I'm playing with or what's going on with my band, or if I'm playing with another jazz band or another funk band or whatever, my ears are hopefully more open to adjusting to what's going on around me. So I can add take little bits of each one of these pieces and like throw my own thing in there. So
absolutely. We're 15 minutes into this and it's already been 2 questions of just listing artists, which is a bad habit, but also you can't help it. I love it.
Sorry.
If someone's digging into you, this is very, very valuable.
Yeah.
But speaking of you and the musicians that you play with, your quartet, you've played with them for a long time. Almost every other interviewer that I've listened to, asks you about it, and it's a testament because drummer Steve Corley since 2011, pianist Damian Espinosa, and bassist Mark Piani since I believe 2001-ish, or just around in and around there.
Close there. Damien and I started playing together about 2001. So Damien and I have been in bands together around that time. Mark and I have been playing together the longest. We played together in a couple of different bands in the mid to late 90s. We were kind of in each other's orbit. So he was the first guy I thought of when I wanted to put the band together. But the actual band itself has been around. Like we had our first gig as a band in 2005.
Wow.
And so in a sense, I always say this, and I always get in trouble when I say this. I've known two of those guys longer than I've known my wife. So just
Wow.
it's just interesting. It's a musical marriage, if you will.
Yeah. 8 releases since a group effort in 2012. You said it was important for you to have a band that didn't have their head in the music and could actually develop a rapport with. How
Yes.
would you and this is a big abstract question, how would you describe that sound's evolution from a group effort or even before then playing with those three to now with or
Well,
how you're going to play
okay,
with them soon? Yeah.
sure. To work for even for a little bit of context,
Hmm.
like uh, a group effort when we recorded that album live at the main stage.
Mm.
I want to say that was Steve's third or fourth gig with the
Okay.
band, and it was just it's so and I because I knew once he joined the band, like there were some things that there's some things that we can do now. He's such a fantastic drummer that can go in a bunch of different directions. Um,
Like how?
like
Like how with him?
just okay, well, he, he can like if he, there are some drummers that I will call, for playing a funk gig.
Yeah, yeah.
I call that guy for just doing some straight ahead, straight up and down. There's people I call. Steve, I can pretty much do anything I want in the course of a gig. We can do some funky stuff. We can do some odd meter stuff. We can do some Brazilian stuff. We can do some, we can do some fusiony type stuff. We can do some free stuff. We could just, we can go in any different direction. And that's he's just plus what's underneath it all, like he came up playing in church. So
Mm.
there's that South Side groove pocket thing that just all these South Side guys
Yeah.
who come up playing in church, they just had this thing, and it's just like so it's like we're even if we're playing in like 11/8 or something like that. It's not so the way he approaches it is so it's not it's he's not trying to be accessible,
Hmm.
but it's like it's there. People are actually like grooving, nodding their heads along with something in 11/8, which is funny. And regular folks who know nothing about odd time signatures are grooving to what he's doing, and so it's that kind of thing. But he was, like I said, a group effort was his like third or
Sure,
fourth
sure.
gig, and so pretty much I knew like from the get go, like we could just develop into these some. So I could really I can write some more interesting stuff that's challenging to us, but also somewhat interesting to a listener. I also I knew that having a band that can develop a repertoire and a sound over a period of time, like there are certain things that I don't even have to explain. Like I can play a certain fragment of a song and I don't have to say, "Hey guys, we're going to do this." I can just we can end one song and I can start another one by playing a certain fragment or certain notes of the bridge, and whoever starts the song can jump right in and start the song. So it's just there's a telepathy now that's gotten even more intense that I can do, or we could stitch two songs together. We can end one song and immediately jump on to
Mm.
another song, or I can like I can play the first notes of, I can fade out one song and play like a certain thing. And if let's say if Damien's got our piano player, if he's got like the opening or like a rubato piano solo, I can just kind of feed him. This is the melody of the next song in my the out vamp or whatever, and he'll know that when we end this song, he
He
knows
can
to
hear
come
that
in with
melody.
the song.
Yeah.
So just things like that we can do that you can't necessarily do with a bunch of people who, Chicago's chock full of fantastic musicians. But I just knew that when I went to go see a lot of my favorite players, and they're playing these incredible compositions, they're all incredible musicians, but there's not really a cohesiveness, and that's what I want, and that's what thankfully I think the people that have been following us around, they know that there's going to be a cohesiveness when they come see us. There's going to be, man, Damien sounds really great tonight, or or man, the interplay between Steve and Mark, their foundation of the band is just, man, it's growing and sounding so good and grooving this, and so I want people to, I'm the leader, so I get the glory for booking the gig and putting everything together, but
You get your name on it.
right, I get to put my name on it, but I also get off on the fact that they're like they know that Mark and Steve is grooving, and they know that I'm playing something, and Damien has a way of prodding me on to do something that I wouldn't normally think of when I'm soloing. So it's just things like that people don't necessarily, they might not know the technical term for all that stuff. They might not necessarily know what's going on musically, but they can feel it and they can see it. And so those kinds of things are important to me.
Yeah, it's really cool just seeing kind of like more hometown bands, because a lot of jazz artists that really, burn bright in Chicago, they continue to burn bright, but then they find other places around the world, which is totally great. Go on to New York, go on to Tokyo. I know, I'll even name drop, Marquis Hill, who made a huge splash, for the longest time here in Chicago. And then, he's just touring the world, living that dream. Absolutely. But it's also cool on the flip side to see, artists like you and bands being like, kind of like the Emperor of Evanston and his court, just kind of holding it down at the same time, which, there's really no right or wrong way to go about it, but it's
absolutely
seeing how artists develop or how they decide to go about things is, it's an interesting path. It's an interesting path to take. And you mentioned, I didn't know that Steve had played drums for his church, but I shouldn't be surprised, because I think that's like the fourth or fifth drummer who has that background that plays, this genre of jazz, this kind of straight ahead to funky stuff.
Yeah,
it makes perfect sense.
There's something about that feel. It's just like, again, it's something where like you can, everybody, however religious or whatever you are, or not.
That can go back centuries if you trace it.
Right, but there's something to that thing that those guys who come up playing in church. They know how to. Another great. I'm talking about. This has become a Steve Corley appreciation.
Yeah, I guess so.
But it's like he's and it's just being a great drummer. Like I believe he was a percussion major. He wasn't a jazz major, so he knows knows how to bring. In addition to flair and style, there's a certain amount of drama. He knows how to build a solo, or kick the band, kick our collective ass, and make it bring everything to a fever pitch, and then break it down to like super sparse stuff. And it's just to have somebody who's not just bashing away, but who's actually actively listening to what's going on, as in the band and the solo, and just everybody in the band's like that. It's just I'm a lucky man to have musicians that like really listen to what's going on in the moment. So I'm just lucky. I'm very, very fortunate in that respect to have that.
But I do want to get to this specific quirk that you and your band have, is that you guys have this kind of like cheekiness buried under the seemingly deadpan facade. Album names include Soul and Science 2, Electric Boogaloo from 2008, Boundary Issues from 2017, which features your quartet going on a full charge like a comic book splash page, and then one from 2004 just called Jazz, but in quotes.
Right.
And then stuff like quoting the final countdown on In a Sentimental Mood, which sounds like a college level, like sophomore level joke that a professor would roll their eyes at. But no, you did it on Playtime, and it I don't even know if it works. It's just that it works with you guys specifically. Like that's the kind of rapport.
It's funny you mentioned that. We're interesting in that, like, if you catch us off stage, I almost feel bad for like say if we're at the bar and I'm talking to the people or whatever, or we're just hanging out or whatever. I almost feel bad for that real hardcore jazz aficionado that comes to us and, hey, you guys are great, man. Who's your influences and blah blah blah, and we're talking about like Pee-wee's Big Adventure or something. Or we're talking, we're goofing on something else.
That was probably me in college. I'm like, at the jazz showcase. I'm like, we're talking about Prince.
So we're,
cool.
we're talking about like, Rocky III or something. Just like quoting lines from Rocky III. I mean, that's the kind of like mentality that you're dealing with. So the fact it's very astute that you remember that. But that's the kind of thing that we'll do. And it's not even like I'm going to quote the Final Countdown. It's just like it's one of those things that
It was
seemed
on your mind, apparently.
good to do at the time, and it seemed to work. And I was able to, whether or not it was successful, that like you said, maybe it worked, maybe it didn't work, but it's one of those things that seemed like the right thing to do at the time. But I think a part of it is, it's I guess for that kind of thing, I kind of take my cue from like, just I guess just the great, the musicians that we all know and love, like, Cannonball would give these fantastic, you know, any one of his live records, the first 2 or 3 minutes is him just setting up the song and talking about like
Yeah.
what they're going to do.
It's like the half the charm almost of
Right.
of his records.
But this real, like, I mean, half, half scholarly, but half down home kind of thing. So I really appreciate that, or just live Duke where he's talking about, he's talking, or you've probably seen the internet clip where he's trying to get people to snap and everything.
Hey.
Just things like that. I mean, it's like there's some things that we're gonna do as musicians that are gonna fly over the head of the regular folks. But if you try to include them in with, because people already have their minds made up about what it is we do, jazz. Like, am I smart enough to be here? Am I, I don't have any jazz at home. How am I going to know what's going on? It's just like,
Get in your head about it. Everyone does.
right. And some musicians, bless their heart, don't help the cause either. It's just like, rather than build that bridge or whatever like that, just like, well, they don't get it. They just don't get it. It's like, all right, well, all right. But so even with the imagery, like you said, the album titles, there's always like a double meaning, boundary issues, and like you said, boundary issues, or Soul and Science 2, which was kind of inspired by a dare, because we made the first album, Soul and Science Volume 1.
As a dare.
So my best friend is like, so what are you gonna do? What are you gonna, my best friend Dempsey, again, another Generation Xer pop culture dork like myself, is like, so what are you going to do? You're going to name the next one Soul and Science 2 Electric Boogaloo? I was like, I just might. And as it happened, we were starting to introduce more like electric piano and funkier rhythms into the proceedings. So I'm like, it made perfect sense to go there. So it's like, if I can come up with an interesting little pun that encapsulate everything that seems to fit the mindset of whatever it is we're thinking, musically, then, I'll go for it. So.
Yeah. I know 2014's Music Appreciation album art. I remember you saying, or maybe you were tweeting that out when Prince had passed, that it was a tribute to the Parade album, I think.
Yeah. Yes, okay. It was. And it was one of those things. My good friend, another Evanstonian, Ozzy Ramsey, I kind of told him like what I had in mind, and my graphic designer Michael Costell, I kind of told them what I had in mind for the imagery. Didn't want to necessarily pay direct homage to the album musically, but just kind of aesthetically, it was kind of a lot of it was, that album was a left turn for his career. This was a kind of a left turn where we kind of let it all hang out with like a lot of our influences and kind of went in a bunch of different directions. So I kind of wanted to like. I kind of wanted to like grab that. So where I'm thinking of the zeitgeist. I don't know what's the word.
Yeah.
No, so I just wanted to, grab that. So or go for that idea.
It's kind of an aside, but related to Prince. Have you heard of the Loring Park Sessions 77? It's not. I don't think it's an official release. I only found it on YouTube. I don't think it's ever been released.
I have heard it. It's a really interesting thing to kind of show like is certainly his infinite talent, but just the fact that like, I don't know if it was really he did it before or after he got a record deal, but just the fact that he was screwing around in the studio playing fusion-esque stuff is it's kind of as a Prince a completist and fan, it's interesting kind of to hear him stretch out on some instrumental stuff. And you know him so much. You know him so much as an entertainer and a guitarist and a producer that we don't really get to think about the instrumental stuff. And so it's kind of interesting to see that, or hear that rather.
It's like the prequel, almost like just to him as a musician. 'Cause, well,
Right.
his dad was like a straight up jazz musician. I think is
Right.
that you're the aficionado,
Right.
but that's so crazy because it's like, oh man, where's more of this? But also like,
Right.
maybe it is right that he didn't go on to do that, because maybe then if he had just stuck with that, maybe he wouldn't have found as much success as he did.
Well,
Maybe.
are you familiar? Are you familiar with the Mad? Good question. Are you familiar with the Madhouse albums at all?
I am not.
So, in the midst of his like mid '80s success, he built a project around his saxophone player, Eric Leeds, and so basically he wrote this instrumental stuff, and it was kind of his version of jazz. Now, whether or not you think of it as a jazz album,
Sure.
it's debatable because does he have a command of the language and history that other people might have? Probably not, but it's a really valiant and earnest attempt to make some instrumental music with a saxophone lead. So he basically wrote all the stuff and had Eric come in and play over it. But it's a really interesting album. It's a really he made two albums, and they're both really interesting musically. So
yeah, 8 and 16 apparently.
8 and 16. I'll send them to you. They're good stuff.
Well, now you're giving me listening homework, and I'm perfectly okay with that. You recorded the album PlaySPACE in 2018, which is a live concert recording at Space in your hometown of Evanston, in your realm of Evanston. Right. Your latest album, PlaySPACE 2, Play Harder, is Downbeat's one of their best albums of 2022, 3.5 stars.
4.5, but who's counting?
I'm counting. I miscounted, and I was so entranced by the bicycle video that you released. Again, playing into that cheekiness. I love it so much. And features PlaySPACE 2 features more performances from that same venue. I haven't been yet, but you've called it your favorite space, your favorite venue of all time.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's a great place to see a show. It's a great place to play. I mean, like I've seen everybody there, from Babel Gilberto to Bela Fleck to Marcus Roberts to Maceo Parker to Victor Wooten. It's a fantastic room. Also, it's a great place to play because they treat you really nice. It sounds great in there. The food is really good. They just treat you really nice. And they're set up for a multi-track recording. So nice. The cool thing is that if you bring a flash drive or a portable hard drive to the show, you hand it to the sound man. While you're packing up, everything you just did is on your flash drive. And so that's what we ended up doing for the first PlaySpace. I was originally just gonna let's update our demo, or maybe we'll give some stuff to people who we'll do a free download or something. We'll do like the playtime part, another playtime or something. But it ended up sounding so good. I'm like, wow, we've grown so much. And I mean, Steve's been in the band almost 10 years. We've really grown as a band. We've grown individually as musicians. Maybe it's just trying to really capture that, let folks in on what we're doing or what we're sounding like. So that was a kind of impetus behind that.
Do they charge for the recording for the?
Not very much. I think it's like $50 or something like that.
That's nothing for for a live recording.
And again, you've got
straight to
you got all what you just did, and you can take it to your home studio and just play at the levels and adjust and edit and do what you want, and then you end up with a good record, hopefully.
Dude, that's awesome. Wow, I didn't know that's space is a nice space.
It is. It really is. I'm biased, just hometown stuff, right. but it's a great, it's a fantastic venue. Then they get really good. They get really good national people, and they've been really, really receptive, thankfully, to a lot of local folks, and they've actually been programming a fair amount of local jazz artists. So a lot of my friends, Tiffany Monique and Marcus Hill's been there. Greg Ward's done a thing there. So they've had a few a fair amount of local folks there. So my buddy Michelle Thomas has done a few things there. So they've done a lot of stuff there.
Nice. PlaySPACE 2 also features one song from the Laundry Room in
Yeah.
Berwyn in
Yes.
2021. Is the Laundry Room still around? Because I tried looking it up.
Ah, so the laundry room is actually the basement of my of Mark Piani's basement.
I figured it was something like that because I can't find a thing. I saw like the world's largest
I
laundromat
should,
in,
you know what? I shouldn't even say anything. I should have said it's an exclusive studio that you have to have a membership to have, I should have just totally hipped it up. Like, you know what? You're not cool enough to know about where this is. I'm sorry, Dominic, I can't tell you.
It's
So
okay.
I should have just played into it. Damn it, Mark. Sorry, Mark.
I'm not hip, not hip yet.
But no, it's so yeah. Part of the we added PlaySpace 2 is most of the stuff was recorded in, forgive me, most of the stuff was recorded in 2019, and we had one track from a show that we did at Space in 2020, and I knew that I wanted at least one original I wanted a new original, and also just I wanted to we hadn't really done a studio recording since 2017, so I just figured, let's put that in there. And so we ended up kind of putting it together. And this, it's not without precedent. I mean, there's a number of Frank Zappa albums where, there's live, but there's one that's been either tweaked in the studio or re-recorded in the studio. And I think there's the P-Funk live record from the 70s. There's literally one or two new studio recordings there. So I was just kind of like, all right, so I'm cheating a little bit, but there you go. But yeah, so I wanted to do one. I wanted to put a new tune on there, just kind of as a thank you for the people who've been following us. So
yeah, we're talking about how you have this like almost deadpan, seemingly attitude about most things, except for the one or two in between. But for bassist Mike Piani and for your pianist Damian Espinosa. They seemingly are so soft spoken, and then you see them on the Boundary Issues cover, and they're just going off.
Right. Yeah.
It's just really funny how it's like they're playing it. It can hit so hard as well in a good way, and I mean that in the best way possible. Because you guys, just like your background, it's funk, at least 2 albums of funk with new perspective.
Right.
And it just really cool how the quartet meshes together. And actually, side note, who did the album photography for Boundary Issues? And then that one shot, it looks like it's from the same person, of the 4 of you with like sunglasses on. And you've got
okay. Yes, that's actually my buddy Ozzy Ramsey, high school, junior high buddy. He's basically been our official photographer. Since for a very long time. And so pretty much I feed him these. I don't know. I'm big on delegation. There's nothing that I can tell Damien. I can't tell him how to play the piano. I can only tell him what I'd like to hear, what the point of the song is, and what I'd like to hear, and what do you think you can add in this thing. Same way with the people I work with as far as like graphic design and photography. It's the same thing. It's like, this is the concept of the album. This is the idea that I want to get across. What do you think you can do? There's nothing I can tell Ozzy about photography. Mm-hmm. He's just a brilliant photographer. There's nothing I can tell him about that. So just like, these are the ideas. I want to be like badass superhero kind of guys. And he's like, gotcha. And he comes up with something, and it's better than I could even possibly imagine. So it's the same thing. It's just like, that's why I'm lucky enough to play with the guys I play. It's like, hey guys, this is the point of the song. Let's work together to make it the best version of the song that we can make it. What do you do? What do we do? And that's how it works. It's same thing with photography and graphic design and everything else. It's just, let's make it the best thing that we can make it.
Yeah, actually, badass and superhero were the top 2 things that came to my mind. As soon as I saw that cover, I'm like, God damn, Damien is like one-handing a whole keyboard.
A whole keyboard.
I'm laughing just looking at it, just thinking about it.
A whole keyboard. Yes, yes. He's holding up a whole keyboard.
He'll have to show me that trick when I see you guys at Space on the 23rd of July.
Yes.
Which we will see if we tried to record this earlier, but we'll see if I can edit this down in time for that day. But if not, you've got a newsletter as well, and I've got a few more questions as well.
Sure.
Before we get to the pluggables. So actually, but yeah, just speaking of like your website, for instance, you have a running list of jams in the Chicagoland area.
I do, and I need to update that. But
Sure.
And you reminded me, I need to update that because some of those jams are no longer active, and so there are a bunch of new ones. But I did, and I do. But yes, thank you for reminding me. I do have it as kind of a resource for people, but I need to. Thank you for reminding me. I need to.
When did you start it up?
I want to say 10 years ago, something like that. Yeah, 10 years ago. It just kind of dawned on me that there are little bits and pieces that you could find. Like you could find some jams, say on the WDCB website,
Right.
but you'd have to scroll through, everybody's
All the shows.
Right, all the shows to get there. And so it just kind of dawned on me, you know what, maybe I should take it upon myself and, put that together. And it ended up helping just because people would come there looking for jam sessions and then like, oh, I saw your website. I should come see you play. It's like, and that wasn't even necessarily my impetus behind doing that, but it's just like, all right, if I get some attention as being, a helpful hand to somebody, a jam session list, then so be it.
Well, as someone who just wants to explore, that's certainly helpful for me. The fact that you have jazz trials in Yorkville on there, which
Yes.
I don't know if Mike, I always forget, he's on the pans. Steel pans.
I know what you're talking. I know who you're talking about.
I always get his name wrong. Schwarby? Nope. I'm not even gonna try.
Yeah,
He runs the jazz trials, and it's a good jam. It's a good jam out in Yorkville of all places, which you don't think of as Jazztown, USA, but it is.
Right.
I actually really like that. I got family out there, and that's actually a really nice spot.
Yeah.
They also have silent disco.
Okay.
But
What's
okay.
that?
Idea to get 3 jazz quartets and just have them play in a silent jazz. Now you know what? Never mind. Forget about it.
Okay.
That's not going to work.
I like where you're headed.
We can workshop it. You were just complete change of topic. You were going to perform a concert in tribute to Eddie Harris in 2020, but it looks like the world shut that down. Did you ever get to perform that concert?
No, I did not. Not at least not with the quartet. I ended up kind of doing a solo thing. So it was really cool. The Jazz Institute asked me to be a part. Like every year, they pick an artist or more some Chicago artists or artists with Chicago ties to pay homage to with a series of concerts and discussions throughout the year. And so they picked me to do a concert for Eddie Harris. It was supposed to be in April of 2020, and I was really fired up. Like we were going to do a few of the recognizable ones, like Freedom Jazz Dance and a couple of them. But I was really going to try to go deep into like his catalog of stuff that not a lot of people play. Just he's written a bunch of really great quirky tunes that just no one ever touches. So I just happened to get on this really cool arranging bent of arranging, researching, and really doing a deep dive in his albums, and then just kind of like doing some research on him, and just finding out that he was this incredibly deep guy that was like basically he was hanging out with he was basically in the Wuhal Richard Abrams experimental big band that would workshop these songs every week. That basically eventually became the AACM. He was down with those guys and played a lot of gigs with those guys. And the only reason he didn't is because he had this massive hit with the theme from Exodus, the movie theme. He had this massive hit, and so he became Eddie MF and Harris and went off and just had this incredible career. But yeah, so it's just things like that, and just his educate. He's got a saxophone, or he's got a etude book, which is brilliant and intimidating and just incredibly frustrating. It's a fantastic book. You can get your hands on it. It's insane the things that he would do or come up with these little exercises he would come up with. Like, no wonder you played the way you played. You're insane. But it was a really great book. But just I was really going to go deep into talking about him and just obviously it was a disappointment that we didn't get to do it. Which we may do it someday. We may do it at that concert again someday. But it was good research. He was another one of those guys that I kind of gave lip service to, as far as liking him, and then I had a real reason to really dive in and research him, and I'm like, oh my god, how have I been sleeping on this guy this long? And so it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully one day.
I'd be really curious too, because I mostly just know his stuff with Les McCann, like of course Freedom Jazz Dance and some of the really, really funky popular stuff. But I always love when an artist can dive really deep. There's a pianist in Chicago named Chris White.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. And I always joke that you two need to form a band with like Wardell Gray or something. So it's like the colors.
It's funny. We actually have a long running joke that we have talked about it of putting a project together of myself, Chris White, and like other people with names of colors in them, and doing just songs of color, like Red Clay, Orange Sky, Purple Rain, and we actually have had long conversations about this, and we keep talking about it. The only problem is we get hung up on the name of the band. I think an awesome name would be the Colored Section. I think that would be a fantastic name.
And for the record, Chris White is Caucasian.
Yes, I think that would be a fantastic name.
That's so funny.
We might not get any gigs out of it, but I think, God damn it, let's name a band.
I think you would. I think that would be a
the
spicy enough name to really get people going.
Let's name the band the Colored Section. See, you're like, oh my God.
You would have to deliver, though. You'd have to deliver.
We would have
with a name like that.
But we've talked about it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But we have talked.
Please keep interrupting if you've got. That's so funny.
No, we've talked about that. We need to quit fooling around and do it. But yeah, we've talked about putting that project together.
But I guess. Well, that just topped whatever I was going to say. But I think, Chris White, he's kind of become the de facto Vince Guaraldi guy, the Guaraldi guru every Christmas time, or even he's done stuff for the Great Pumpkin.
Right. At Winters, he does a lot of stuff in Winters.
He's done such a good deep dive into Guaraldi beyond Peanuts as well. Like his stuff with Black Orfeo Negro or Black Orpheus that he did Guaraldi did a cover of and all that stuff. So when I was just gonna say that it's cool when an artist can take kind of, because everyone's got their Miles Davis tribute, their Wayne Shorter tribute, which is great, never a bad idea, never a bad thing. But when you can take an artist that's kind of been unsung, like Hank Mobley, like Guaraldi, and
and everybody, like you said, I mean, everybody knows who Guaraldi is because of the Peanuts Association, but that's really cool that he's doing these deep dives on him. Exactly.
Yeah. You mentioned, I guess, kind of going off of Guaraldi, you've mentioned offhandedly you'd be interested in doing a movie or a video game soundtrack. Is there one that you had in mind, or if you've given much thought to it, lip service?
No, not really. I mean, I've had the opportunity to score a couple of local theater productions, to do a couple things. Like I did a few years ago, there was an adaptation of a great young adult novel called Bud Not Buddy. But I think this young African American kid who I think he discovers his father's a musician, and they've been kind of estranged, and they're kind of adventures as far as getting to know each other. So I had the pleasure of writing the music for that, and it's something that I'd really like to put it out there. I'd love to do it again, and just if I get the opportunity to write for like a movie, like a local independent movie or something like that, I'd relish the opportunity just to stretch in a different way.
I always love seeing when a jazz artist can take on something like a movie in particular, because it can be such a different beast. So whenever like a big Oscar movie gets this was made like a jazz soundtrack, it's such a big thing, and I'm like, well, my approach was just completely different. I was like, wow, okay.
Well, it was cool. It was such like I said, the one of the plays I did, it was cool because like I've learned the value of writing to the situation, because I think I just wrote all this music, like this scene, this and this scene, on this and that and this one with this theme and this theme, and they ended up like basically all I need is like this much of what you just wrote. I need that much, because we only have like 30 seconds of, time or whatever.
Right.
And it was just like, oh, okay, I get it. And it was a valuable experience because you have to learn how to write to the situation and not make it about you. You're not, the, if you're John Williams or somebody, you can make these grand artistic statements in the context of a movie. But, the rest of us have to write something that fits into these, 30-second, 20-second little nicks.
Yeah.
And so I learned a valuable lesson about how having to do that. And so I would love to do that again.
Yeah, a little different than taking like 7 minutes on Cherokee.
Exactly.
For as long as you possibly want to, whenever you're,
right.
you're done.
You got to get right to the point. You got to get right to the point. Get right to the melody or convey whatever emotion that needs to be conveyed and get right to the point. So
yeah. So you know what? I'll just end with this last question here, which is, what's it like to have made it as a working musician? Which is where a lot of musicians my age, younger, or even older, who may not be able to have that, just seeming to have I hope, stable income or have a good network and have shows come through. What's it like to be there for a lot of people who are just starting off?
They'll be there. Are you? Well, are you ever really there?
Yeah,
that's a big thing. Well, thank you. It's feast or famine. It's feast or famine. Right now, it's things are really busy, and I couldn't be more grateful. When you're young or whatever, in your 20s and 30s, you kind of get frustrated when the activity drops off, and like, what am I going to do? That's where, at least now, I'm trying to be a little more mindful of the time. So that's when I try to practice more or try to work on my writing or whatever. But it's I don't know if I've ever really think of. I mean, I guess I am making it, but I don't really think I have made it. But I am certainly grateful that I'm in a bunch of. I'm grateful that I work with a bunch of really cool musicians. I spend my days and nights working with some fantastically talented men and women who or just who leave it all on the stage every single night. Or if it's a private event, it's just like we might just be doing wallpaper music, but it's always a fun time playing with these people. So it's just I'm thankfully I'm in a good place where I'm working with cool people. I'm mostly artistically satisfied. I'm very satisfied with the situations that I find myself in. And I'm the lights are still on, thankfully. The lights are still on, and there's food in the fridge for my son. My son has all the snacks he could ever want. So like things are good. Things are good.
I think it's the fact that you get to play the music that you want to play. I've noticed with some other friends where it's like they're just not quite there yet. They're kind of like, yeah, I'm on coming to these side gigs, here and there. But I think for you, having a group with your name on it for playing with people that you like playing with for that long, I think there's an accomplishment there.
But thank you. But I will say that it's a weird thing because everything that I'm doing now is somehow it's weird. Like, man, I don't say everything that I'm doing now, but a lot of the things that I'm doing now are tied to associations and people that I've met 10 to 20 years ago, or even just like, or even just like I might have done a really crappy $50 gig in 1998, but the guy who the guy who either booked me or I was on the gig with me he remembered that I was a moderately decent human being, and so now he wants me to play. He's on the board for some jazz festival somewhere in the suburbs, and now he remembers me as being a good player and a decent human being. So hey, I hear you got a band, and I want to book your band. So it's just there's going to be ups and downs, but if you just continue to stay on your game and try to be as decent of a person as you can, you'll never be out of work. You'll never be out of work. I mean, look, even if I didn't have a band, as long as people listen to the song "Careless Whisper," I will always have a job.
There you go.
I will always have a job.
Chris Greene, thank you so much for joining me through all the logistical ups and downs of getting to this moment. But yeah, if you want to plug I know you got your show at Space on July 23rd. That's a big one. Your favorite spot. Is that going to be recorded? Is that going to be? Are we going to?
We are going to be recording. Will it be PlaySPACE Part 3? I don't know.
Maybe a few tracks. Maybe
it may be. But yeah, Sunday, July 23rd. Me and my buddies Steve Corley, Mark Piani, Damien Espinoza, having a DJ set with Ian Dismore and DJ Pickled Beats, aka Jennifer Green, my sister, opening up as people file in. And it should be a fun time. I love playing there. I love that room. I love the people that come out to see us. Just excited to do it.
ChrisGreenJazz.com, at Chris Greene Jazz on Instagram, and you've got an awesome mailing list. So Chris, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dominic. I really appreciate. Thank you so much.